All right, so buckle up because today we're going full Sherlock Holmes and doing a deep dive into something you don't see every day. We're talking piano practice logs, the real deal.
It's like we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain, right? These aren't the polished performances you see on stage. These are the raw notes, the struggles, the aha moments, all laid bare.
We got a whole stack of these logs. Each one is called a Bitacora, and then the student's name. Cristobal, Francesca, Jacques Beatrice, Luciano. The gang's all here.
A real diverse group, too. Different ages, different levels, different personalities, which I think really highlights that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning, even with something as structured as piano.
It's true. And I have to admit, going through these, it really did feel like peeking into someone's musical diary. You get those technical details, sure, but also these little glimpses into their lives, their personalities.
Exactly. It's not just about the notes on the page. It's about the person behind the music and how their lives, their experiences all feed into that journey.
So, like, where do we even start with this mountain of piano diaries?
Well, one thing that jumped out at me right away was the sheer emphasis on technique. I mean, that's no surprise, right?
Not at all. Think of it like building a house. You wouldn't expect to slap up some walls without a strong foundation, would you? Technique is that foundation in piano playing. It's what allows you to build something truly amazing.
Cristobal's log, especially, it reads like a construction site. Hand positioning, finger work, wrist movement. His teacher, Pedro Piano, was like his musical architect. And, that's a great takeaway for learning anything new. Whether it's piano, coding, or mastering a new recipe, those fundamental techniques are what allow you to build something amazing.
Speaking of amazing, can we talk about the tech? I was blown away by how much technology these students are using. I have to admit, I was expecting more like, Beethoven and less Bluetooth, but wow.
Right. Electronic keyboards, audio recording. Luciano even mentions using AI for music composition. It's amazing to see how technology is changing even something as traditional as music.
Hold on, AI composing music now, that's just wild. Are we saying piano teachers are going extinct? Or is this just a new tool in the toolkit? What do you think?
It's a great question and one that I think we're going to be grappling with more and more. But one thing's for sure, these students are definitely at the forefront of something big.
It makes you wonder what the future holds. But for now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. At the heart of this deep dive are the human stories woven through these practice logs. Sure, there are scales and arpeggios, but there's real life happening between the lines.
And honestly, those are often the most revealing parts, the moments of vulnerability, the frustration, but also that pure joy when something finally clicks. That's what makes these logs so fascinating.
Like with Sebastian Z, right? You can just tell from his log that he loves Disney.
Yeah.
And that totally influences his musical tastes. He's not just a name on a page, he's a whole person.
It reminds us that learning isn't just about memorizing facts or hitting the right notes. It's about connecting with something on a personal level, finding that meaning and joy in the process.
Totally. But those connections don't make the actual work of learning any easier. Like, remember how Cristobal was struggling to visualize the piano keyboard? Not even the music itself, just like the layout, the visual aspect of it.
Right, it's like the difference between hearing a new language and actually seeing it written down. Sometimes that visual element is key.
And then there's life, just throwing curveballs left and right, completely unrelated to music. Like when Francesca mentions having trouble finding a comfortable position to play, or when Martin talks about work stress cutting into his practice time.
It's a good reminder that learning, especially something as demanding as piano, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Life happens, and these logs really capture that beautifully.
It's like they say, practice makes progress right. And speaking of progress, I feel like Cristobal's journey, his Bitacora, is a great example of how those personal struggles, those life happens moments, actually play out.
Yeah, let's take another look at his log. Early on, there's an entry from October 5th where he's mentioning crossing fingers, a new scale, Pedro Piano reminding him about strong notes.
It's really like sitting in on their lesson.
I know, right? And remember that bit where Cristobal is having trouble visualizing the keyboard layout? And Pedro suggests printing one out for him. So simple, but so smart.
It's that kind of tailored approach that makes all the difference. It's like, one-size-fits-all education versus having a suit made just for you. And you can see from these logs, Pedro Piano, he's like that tailor, finding the perfect fit for each student. Totally. And those challenges, they pop up in all sorts of ways, like fast forward a bit in Cristobal's log, he's doing accents, rhythms, even experimenting with tempos. But then there's this entry where Pedro has to tell him, like, hey, Actually look at the notes. Don't just play from memory.
Which, let's be honest, is something we're all guilty of sometimes, right? Thinking we've got something down because we can just repeat it. But really understanding it, that takes a deeper level.
Totally. And Cristobal, he starts to get there. Later on, there's an entry from August 2nd, where he's using terms like staccato. He's working on pieces with time signatures like 6/8. He's clearly moving beyond the basics.
He's not just playing the piano anymore. He's starting to speak its language. There's even a point where he and Pedro, they break down this musical exercise into like question and answer phrases, like they're analyzing a piece of literature or something.
He went from piano student to like junior music analyst. But even with all that progress, Cristobal's log also shows that learning isn't always a straight shot to the top. You know, there are plateaus, setbacks, those times when you just feel stuck.
Oh, absolutely. There's one entry where he's clearly struggling with this one rhythm, having to repeat it over and over. It's a good reminder that even the most talented students, they have to embrace those moments of struggle. It's part of the process.
It's like that saying, learn from your mistakes, but applied to piano. And it's encouraging in a way, you know? Like, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to get frustrated, rewind 1,000,000 times if you have to.
Exactly. Sometimes those mess-ups are the best learning opportunities. They teach you resilience, they teach you patience, and sometimes they teach you when to ask for help.
And that's where having a good teacher is so important. And you can see that in Cristobal's log, that back and forth with Pedro, asking questions, getting feedback. It makes a huge difference.
Oh, without a doubt. It makes you wonder, where would Cristobal be without Pedro? These logs, they really highlight that teacher-student bond, that mentorship. It's invaluable.
Like having a musical Sherpa guiding you up the mountain, right?
Right.
But we can't forget, Cristobal's just one story. We've got a whole cast of characters here, each with their own unique perspective.
Right. So we've got Cristobal embracing the tech, and then you have Francesca, who's dealing with more physical challenges, like finding the right posture, the right way to sit. Her log really highlights the importance of ergonomics.
She even mentions working on her wrist movement to avoid getting tense. It's a good reminder that piano isn't just about your fingers, it's your whole body.
It's like an athletic performance in a way, right? And just like Cristobal, she has her tech troubles too. There's an entry where she and Pedro are dealing with some kind of audio issue before they can even start the lesson.
The struggle is real. But you know whose log I really connected with? Jacques Beatrice. Juggling work, life, all of it, and trying to fit in practice, that's real life.
Absolutely. That's the reality for a lot of adult learners, right? Finding the time, making it a priority. It's not always easy.
And celebrating the small wins. Like later in Jacques' log, she's working on hand coordination, rhythm. You can see the progress.
Those little breakthroughs, they make all the difference. They keep you going.
Speaking of breakthroughs, Luciano, our resident AI whiz kid, his bit of Cora, it's like classical music meets the future.
That AI video he made for Teacher's Day. Classic Luciano. But he's not just blindly embracing tech, he's thinking about it critically too.
There's this whole discussion he has with Pedro about AI and music. The pros, the cons, whether it helps or hinders creativity. Pretty deep stuff.
It's a debate that's only going to get more heated as AI gets more advanced. And Luciano's log, it puts us right in the middle of it.
Mind-blowing stuff. So we've got tech-savvy Luciano, and then there's Macarena, who's tackling this whole learning curve later in life.
And proving it's never too late. Sure, she gets frustrated when her fingers don't cooperate, but that determination, it's inspiring.
I love that entry where she's struggling with the fingering and Pedro has to break it down like step by step. Reminds me of learning guitar. So frustrating.
Yeah.
But then when it clicks, magic.
And those aha moments, they come from Macarena too. She goes from hesitant beginner to tackling these more complicated pieces, and you can see the confidence building.
That willingness to challenge yourself, it's something we see with Martin too. His whole thing is about discipline, setting goals.
He's very aware of his own progress, or lack of it sometimes. There are entries where he's frustrated because he hasn't practiced enough, forgetting parts, but he's also learning from it.
Instead of getting discouraged, he and Pedro come up with strategies, better ways to practice. There's even a part where he's using a metronome, which, let's be real, even pros use those.
Exactly. It's about constantly pushing yourself, refining your craft, no matter what level you're at.
And that love for learning, it's definitely there with Pia too. She's our youngest student, and her log really captures that experience of learning piano as a kid.
Struggling with reading the music, getting those hands to cooperate. We've all been there.
I love that entry where she's complaining about having to play slowly to get it right. Like, come on, I just want to play.
That impatience,
Yeah.
that's childhood in a nutshell. But then, of course, you also see that pure joy when she masters something or gets to show it off.
So pure. And, that joy, that love for music, it shines through even in the face of challenges, like with Sebastian C.
His story is incredible, dealing with that wrist injury early on, having to adapt, finding new ways to play.
It's like sometimes life throws you a curveball and you got to adjust your grip. And Sebastian C's log is full of those adjustments, working with Pedro on exercises, trying different positions, finding what works for him.
It's about taking ownership of your learning, right?
Yeah.
Not trying to fit into some mold, but figuring out what works best for you.
And for Sebastian C., what worked for him led to some amazing progress. He goes from overcoming this injury to exploring different styles, even talking about wanting to improvise.
It's a powerful reminder of just how transformative music can be.
So here we are, all this time later, after digging through these incredible practice logs, getting to know these piano students. I don't know about you, but it's been a wild ride.
Wild and surprisingly emotional at times. You think about learning piano and it seems so technical, but these bidacoras, they show you the heart, the soul behind all that work.
It's like we opened up a music theory textbook and found these real, honest stories tucked between the scales and chords.
And they remind you that any kind of learning, whether it's music, languages, whatever, it's a journey and it's personal. You got to embrace the tough parts, celebrate the wins, and most importantly, actually enjoy the ride.
It's not about being some kind of prodigy, hitting every note perfectly. It's about showing up, putting in the time, even if it means hitting rewind 1,000 times to get it right. Or, in this case, going back a measure or two.
And don't forget about the teacher. Having that support, someone who gets you, it makes all the difference. And you can see that with Pedro Piano in every single bidacora. His passion shines through. He's a mentor, a guide, a cheerleader. He's got it all.
The Mr. Miyagi of piano teachers. But instead of wax on, wax off, it's all finger exercises and watch your dynamics. And speaking of change, we can't forget about technology, right? It's everywhere.
For sure. From electronic keyboards to AI composing music,
Yeah.
these students, they're not afraid of the future. They're embracing it.
It makes you wonder what being a musician will even mean in the next decade, right? Maybe we'll have algorithms writing symphonies right alongside human composers.
That's a whole other deep dive right there. But even with all that tech, these logs, they remind you that learning, at its core, it's a human thing. It's about connecting with something bigger than yourself, about tapping into your own creativity, finding that joy in the journey.
And sometimes that journey throws you curveballs.
Yeah.
We saw how life outside of piano lessons, work, relationships, even a pandemic, it all plays a part. We don't learn in a bubble, do we?
Not at all. We bring our whole selves to it, all the messy, complicated bits. And honestly, I think that's what makes the breakthroughs, the aha moments, so much more powerful. You see the effort, the dedication, the sheer will it takes to get there.
It's pretty inspiring when you think about it. Right? Makes you want to dust off that old instrument, sign up for that online class you've been putting off.
I know, I'm feeling motivated. These logs, they remind you that learning anything, it's a gift you give yourself. It's how we grow, how we see the world in new ways.
It's not just about checking skills off a list. It's about becoming a more well-rounded, curious, engaged human. And hey, who knows? Maybe someday someone will be looking at our practice logs, our journeys, just as amazed as we are by these ones.
Yeah, that would be something.